She kept her phone face down. I found the pewter feather bookmark in a new self-help paperback with unmarked pages. Notifications sounded. I left the paperback with the bookmark inside. 5 minutes before I shut down my screen, her message came through: skip dinner, last-minute reset class with Lena. I stared at it long enough for the dots to vanish. I sent back sure, no problem. That was enough. We didn't do last minute. Thursdays were predictable by design: boil pasta, talk about the small things, fall into the same 2 chairs. That steady rhythm wasn't glamorous. It kept us easy with each other. Changing it felt like moving a picture on a wall I saw every day. Driving home, the light turned red and caught a glint in the cup holder. Her pewter feather bookmark lay there, angled against the receipt. She never went anywhere without the novel it lived in. On the coffee table, on her lap, dogged by habit but not careless. The feather looked strange on its own, like a key without a door. I picked it up at the next stop. The metal was cool, heavier than it looked. The etched barbs were clean, no tarnish, no bend. I turned it between fingers and thought about the word reset. It had a clean feel, like a button on a machine. I couldn't remember hearing her say it before she started spending more time with Lena. At home, the kitchen had the quiet of a room waiting. I filled the pot anyway. The burner hissed, the lid rattled, the window fogged at the corners. I set out 2 plates. Habit took care of my hands. Her text pinged again while the sauce warmed. Running late. Might crash at Lena's after. All good. I watched the bubbles rise and flatten. I typed back, got it. Be safe. The screen stayed blank after that. The feather sat near the salt. I didn't set it down like something precious, just where my hand landed. The oven clock ticked in even counts. Outside, someone walked a dog. A car door shut. Familiar noises that usually folded into our end-of-day routine. Tonight they sounded like a list. She read in the car sometimes, not moving, not even pretending to. She'd open a book and let the day split into 2 quiet parts. Maybe that was how the feather ended up where it did. Maybe she'd pulled it and forgotten to put it back. Or maybe she meant to leave it there and didn't think to say. I drained the pasta and tucked a towel over the pot to keep the heat. It was a small fix. I moved the second plate back to the shelf. No statement in it. The night was just going to be shaped differently. On the counter was the paperback she'd been into all month, the one with the gauzy cover and very firm chapter titles. The feather usually pressed itself into those pages. Seeing the book without it made the whole stack look a little lighter, like it would slide if I breathed too hard. I didn't touch the book. I placed the feather on the edge of the counter instead, where the last of the sunlight could find it, and dulled to gray. The household sound in a particular way when one person is missing. The bathroom fan 2 rooms away seems louder. The floor gives more. I sat, ate, cleaned up. I didn't check the time. I didn't send a follow-up. When the pot cooled, I stored it and wiped the stove. The feather stayed where I'd left it, small and certain. I turned off the kitchen light and let the dark settle around it. Tonight would go however it went. I could wait without turning it into anything else. By morning the feather was gone. The counter was dry, the stove cold, a glass turned upside down on the rack that I hadn't used. Her shoes were by the door, toes already pointing outward. An alarm went off at a time she used to mock. She pulled on a light jacket, looped her keys through 2 fingers, and gave me a small nod I wasn't sure how to read. She left without coffee. Dawn runs became a thing with a gentle name. Reset, recharge, something that sounded like fresh towels. She came back flushed and quiet, scrolling with her thumb but not lingering long enough to land on anything. The phone started living face down on the table. So we talk more, she said, smiling like it was a kindness. We did talk, but smaller. Weather, schedules. She stopped the drift into the in-between parts with soft redirects, as if she were steering a canoe and the current was my fault. Lena's name started operating like a dimmer. The screen would brighten under my palm, a light chime, and a quick little laugh that wasn't for me. Not new, exactly, just tuned. When I asked how the class was, she said they'd covered boundaries. She used the word like it came with instructions. Tools, space, honoring capacity. She said it politely, the way you put a coaster under someone's glass. I nodded, and she watched for a reaction I didn't offer. The feather stayed missing. I didn't ask. It's a small thing to misplace. Light enough to ride in a coat lining or sink into the space between cushions. I kept noticing the lack of it, an empty rectangle where her novel usually sat, a softer fold at the top of her tote where the metal used to weigh the canvas. The house adjusted around that absence in the same quiet way it had at dinner. 3 days later, a book I didn't recognize appeared on the coffee table. Matte cover in a color reserved for bathrooms. The title promised a better way to speak to people you loved without incident. The spine was uncreased, and the pages had the starch of new paper. The feather rested halfway through, marking a chapter about scripts and reframing. I opened to it. The page smelled like ink and dust, not skin. No dog ears, no notes. The metal left a thin impression that would fade by morning. She saw me looking and touched my arm. "It's helpful," she said, as if the book and I shared a question. "Just ideas. Lena's been sharing some." Her voice was bright in the middle and careful at the edges. I let the pause settle. She waited for me to resist the premise. I didn't. A week arranged itself around those tiny adjustments. She'd step into a hallway to take a call, still within sight, not hiding, but angled so I was background. She'd return with a phrase she tried on like a new jacket. I heard myself described in categories that lived on charts. Intensity, patterns, capacity again. She said it was good to name things. I set plates on the table, passed the salt, and listened to the names line up. At night she placed the phone between us face down, screen buzzing against the wood. "So we're not distracted," she said. We ate slower. She asked about work and smiled at the right spots. When I returned the questions, she skimmed. It wasn't disrespect. It was choreography. She kept a tone designed to glide over friction. I recognized the technique. It belonged to a room I hadn't been in. The self-help book migrated to the nightstand, always topped by the feather, as if the weight kept it from sliding into something less tidy. I didn't touch it after that first look. It was her object, even if it had been mine to notice. The air between us held. Not tense. Just organized. I could see where the new borders were drawn, and how they fit around my chair. I missed the mess of her old laugh and said nothing about it. I folded my own habits smaller. I left space where she put the words. It wasn't surrender. It was choosing which parts of the room to occupy while she tried on a language I didn't speak yet. Lena's building had the kind of hallway that kept voices. I brought the sparkling water like I was delivering a peace offering no one had asked for. Maya swung her tote off her shoulder to dig for the keys, missed, and the bag tipped. The pewter feather slid out and skated a slow arc across the tile until it settled against my shoe. I crouched. The tile was cool through my jeans. The feather was colder, a thin chill right through the pad of my finger. From the open kitchen, Lena's voice reached us, low and certain, as if she'd held the sentence in her mouth until the right moment. "He doesn't deserve you. Just keep steady." A chair leg brushed the floor. A cork gave a tired breath. I stayed there a beat longer than necessary, not hiding and not entering, the word deserve ringing in place, light and hard, like metal touched to glass. Maya found the keys and pushed the door with her shoulder. "Hey," she called, bright enough to be neutral. I stood and followed her in with the bottles. The living room smelled like citrus and eucalyptus. Mats were stacked against the wall, bands looped like limp bracelets over a chair back. Reset written in looping marker on a small whiteboard leaned on a shelf, next to a jar of pens. Lena came around the counter with a practiced smile and 2 tall glasses already iced. "You made it," she said, as if we were late to something that didn't mind. She tapped the neck of a bottle against my wrist in greeting and took the sparkling water without looking at it. She had a way of arranging a room without touching anyone. Maya brushed my arm. A small gesture. "Back in a sec," she said to me into the room, and set the tote by the couch. The space between the tote and my hand felt obvious. I didn't put the feather back. I kept it tucked against my lifeline, the edge marking me in a way no one could see. They talked near the sink in a voice meant to be casual. The kind of tone that pretends it's about recipes and ends with directions. "You're doing great. Don't over-explain. Breathe." The bottles tapped. The ice clinked. Lena looked at Maya when she said breathe, and at me when she said over-explain. I watched the way light caught the pendant around Maya's neck, then moved on. I let the glance pass like weather. "Still on for Saturday?" Lena asked me, louder now, pulling me into the shared script. "We might do an early thing. If you need the car, take it," I said. It was an answer to a different question. It settled where it needed to. Maya's smile held a little too long, the kind you use when you're measuring. We took our places without assigning them. I leaned against the counter. They leaned toward each other. Lena poured and filled the pause with a short story about a neighbor and a dog that didn't want to come back inside. It had a neat ending. Most of her stories did. When laughter was required, I let a smaller version out and folded it away. No one asked about my day, which was fine. I had nothing I felt like donating. The feather sat in my palm, warming finally, a small weight that kept me present. Every time the word deserve tried to walk back through the room, the metal reminded me not to chase it. On our way out, Maya reached for the tote and hesitated, like she'd forgotten what she'd been about to check. Her eyes dropped to my hand, then up to my face. She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. I smoothed my thumb over the feather once, and let the door swing closed behind us. The hallway held the same air as before, thinner now. She touched my sleeve. "You okay?" she asked gently, like she was testing the depth on a step. "I'm here," I said. It was true, and it was enough for the moment. We walked to the stoop without filling the gap. Inside, a glass touched down on a counter. Outside, a bus exhaled and moved on. I didn't hand her the feather. I didn't ask about the sentence that hadn't been meant for me. I held what I had, and let the rest stay where it was. We stood on the stoop long enough for the porch light to time itself off. The building breathed through the seams, music coming thin from somewhere upstairs, the elevator cable sighing behind the brick. Maya waited beside me with her hands tucked into her coat, gaze on nothing I could see. Inside, voices rose and settled. Lena's kitchen had a way of carrying. The door opened. Mason stepped out with a pack and a shrug that apologized without words. He struck a match. The first one flared and died. The second held, a small gold coin between us. He cupped it, lit, shook it out. He kept his eyes on the street like someone watching for a taxi that wasn't coming. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm here," I said again. It covered enough. He nodded at that, like he'd expected more. Smoke eased out, and he pushed it away with the back of his hand, a polite gesture that worked better in theory. "There's this story going around that you've been intense," he said after a careful beat. "People think they're helping." The word rested on the step between us. Intense. It tried to fill more space than it had. I turned the feather in my pocket with my thumb, cool edge giving me lines to trace. It was easier to move the metal than anything else. Mason didn't look at me. He watched a bus drag its light down the block. "I didn't say anything," he added, soft enough that it could count either way. "I figured you'd want a heads up." Another window opened above us. Someone laughed, then caught themselves. The night kept the rest. "Who started it?" I asked, like you ask about a spill when it's obvious where the glass is. He rolled the filter along his knuckles. "Doesn't matter," he said, and then he let a little truth slip through. "It got legs fast." Lena's name didn't appear. It didn't need to. The kitchen light shifted. Her silhouette moved behind the curtain, quick and exact, like she was docking glasses on a shelf. Maya glanced at the door, then at the line of ash on Mason's sleeve. "We should get going," she said to me, as if the timing were ours. "We should," I said, and didn't move. Mason took another pull, looked like he wanted to place a hand on something steady and couldn't find where. "People mean well," he said. "They pick a side without knowing what they're doing. It's just noisy." Noisy was one word for it. Inside, the word deserve had been set down like cutlery and left to ring. Now there was a story to match it. They fit together cleanly. He ground the cigarette out against the iron railing, wiped the mark with his thumb as if that made it not there. "If you want to come by later, just you, we can." He stopped himself. "Never mind. Take care, man." He went back in with his shoulders slightly high. The door closed and put us back in the small square of winter. We walked to the car without deciding to. She asked again, "You okay?" but softer, like she was talking to a sleeping room. "I'm fine," I said. It was the kind of answer that doesn't invite a second one. The drive was uncomplicated. Streetlights stitched the same pattern they always did. She scrolled her messages with the screen tipped away, then caught herself and set the phone face down in her lap, a practiced correction. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 and felt the feather find the same path over and over across my palm, a thin press that stayed after it passed. At a red light I looked at her profile, then at the glove box where she usually kept the novel that belonged to the feather. Both stayed closed. She waited for a comment I didn't have. I let the light change do the talking. Outside our building, she reached for the tote and paused, as if remembering something she was supposed to forget. "Do you have? I'll bring it by." I said. Not tonight. She nodded once and walked ahead, keys ready before the lock needed them. No door was held or not held as a message. We went in like people who know the layout in the dark. In the apartment, I set her sweater aside for later. On the way to bed, I slipped the feather deeper into my pocket so it wouldn't fall when I sat. It still drew its line against my hand, a quiet reminder of edge and shape. I didn't plan past that. I didn't need to. By Kara's birthday, the room had learned a new script. The banner over the kitchen entry leaned to one side, a little tired from being reused, and the table was a deliberate spread of small kindnesses, cut fruit, labeled dips, mocktails and tall glassware. People arrived with the same careful energy I'd started to recognize. They greeted me as if I were returning from somewhere I hadn't gone. At the punch bowl, a woman I only knew through game nights touched my elbow. "How are you managing?" she asked, soft like a nurse. She held my eyes only long enough to register a response and move on. "I'm fine," I said, and let the pause carry the rest. She smiled, relieved to have met her obligation, and drifted back to a cluster that was supposed to look spontaneous. Maya moved through the room as if she'd rehearsed the angles. 2 conversations away, she nodded in a way that invited more words, fewer questions. Her hand rested on people's forearms. Her laugh came out precise, as if borrowed and returned on time. When she glanced over, it was brief and unreadable. I didn't go to her. I poured something red and noncommittal and stood where the string lights hummed. Lena hovered near the kitchen doorway, one finger on the switch of the dimmer, adjusting the light a fraction at a time like a stagehand who couldn't resist the board. She placed napkins at diagonals no one would notice, then noticed them for us. When she passed me, she squeezed my shoulder without looking. "Good to see you out," she said, voice neutral and public. At some point the coat chair became the usual chaos. Hats, a tote with a print of lemon branches, a scarf that didn't belong to anyone here draped on top like a claim. I went to set my jacket down and saw the pewter feather half hidden under the scarf, as if it had flown just enough to be seen. It had a slight curve that hadn't been there before. I didn't think about how it traveled. In this crowd, things moved by suggestion. I picked it up and pressed the spine gently with my thumb until it flattened against my palm. The metal took a second to listen. It always did. When I slipped it into my pocket, I felt the familiar thin line it drew against my hand. I looked around to see if anyone had been watching. Just Mason, lighting a tea candle in a draft that kept snuffing it. He tried again, and the wick caught. He nodded at me like we'd accomplished something together and turned away. "Getting the support you need?" another voice asked, possibly Kara's cousin, possibly someone else who'd been fed the same sentence. I said, "Yes," because it was simpler. The question had a coat-check rhythm, hand in token, receive reassurance. A toast happened near the sink. Kara said a few words about being grateful, about weather, about seasons. I watched the candles waver and come back. Maya laughed at something I didn't hear, her mouth half covered by her heel of her hand in a way that looked unpracticed on her. Lena leaned in, threw her a look that could have been approval, could have been cue. It was the first time that night I saw Maya relax, and it wasn't with me. Someone asked if I'd tried the spinach dip. Someone else mentioned a new trail outside town. Morning's only worth it if you have the right shoes. I agreed in small ways. The room shifted around me, their concern gentle and oddly choreographed, and I let it pass without catching on anything. Back at the coat chair, the scarf had slipped, and the feather flashed again, a quick light in dull metal. I ran a finger along the edge to make sure it wouldn't snag fabric or skin. The bend held almost straight now. I put it deeper into my pocket so it wouldn't go wandering again, and I rejoined the room that had settled on its lines without asking for mine. That was enough for the night. The restaurant kept a low murmur, the kind that fills in the seams without pressing. Pendant lights traced soft circles on the table. I'd slipped the feather from my pocket before she arrived and set it near her water glass, a quiet return. When Maya sat, she touched it with the side of her finger, not surprised, just taking inventory. Lena angled her chair, not quite facing me. "How are you both doing with all the busyness?" she asked the table in general, eyes landing on Maya by habit. Silverware chimed. Someone behind me laughed too loudly at nothing. Maya folded her napkin once, then again. "We're navigating moods," she said, voice light, like she was reporting the weather. "Little storms. Nothing big." She smiled at the others, not at me. A couple of glances bounced off my face and went back to their plates. I sipped water and let the condensation run down my thumb. Lena nodded like she'd been briefed. "You've been steady," she told Maya, as if steady was a posture you could hold if someone noticed hard enough. Mason reached for the bread and didn't say anything, which counted for something. Maya picked up the feather and twirled it between her fingers, wrist loose, a bartender showing off a garnish. "He tracks chapters," she said, the words coming out like a practiced line. "And maybe me." A sweet ripple went around the table, loyal laughter that didn't quite know where to land. The feather caught the light and flashed, a small lighthouse on an easy shore. I let the moment pass untouched. The server slid plates in, heat lifting off the sauce, steam blurring edges, and I moved my glass an inch so the water ring wouldn't bleed into the napkin. Across from me, Lena reached to tuck Maya's hair behind her ear like they'd earned that kind of gesture in rooms I hadn't entered. "Boundaries have been helpful," Maya added, still spinning the feather. "Little check-ins." The metal clicked against her ring, a faint tap-tap that marked time better than any clock. She met my eyes for a second, then checked Lena's face for the cues she needed. It arrived in a small approving smile. I cut into the fish and noticed it was overcooked. I didn't mention it. If anyone asked, I spoke about the seasoning. If no one asked, I ate and looked at the pendant lights mirrored in the glass, the way they kept their circles no matter who sat where. "Change is good," someone offered from the end of the table, wanting to be part of the help. "Space," someone else added. The words were soft, like they'd been sanded before use. I nodded at nothing, the kind of nod that clears a path rather than opens a door. Maya set the feather down to reach for her wine. It came to rest near my fork, a small horizon between us. For a moment her hand hovered, ready to reclaim it, and then a story on her left pulled her away. I palmed the metal and turned it once, twice, the edges cool and familiar. It remembered my pocket easily. Lena leaned into the group, voice syruped for company. "The key is intention," she said. "Maya's been doing the work." Another circle of laughter, more certain this time. I checked the time without looking at my watch. The room's tempo told me enough. "Chapters," Maya repeated, almost playful now, like the joke had warmed up. "He keeps track." My name didn't need to be said. It hung in the space everyone carefully avoided. I didn't correct anything. I let the silence I carried do what it usually does, make people hear themselves. The feather sat hidden in my palm, a thin line pressing across the pads of my fingers. Heat from the plate dulled it, and still it stayed cool. Courses shifted. Someone asked about a weekend plan I didn't have. I gave them something neutral. Maya laughed at a story that leaned on us without naming us. Lena's hand found her shoulder again, and lingered a beat too long to be casual, then moved away when she noticed me notice. The feather had spun, caught the pendant lights, thrown off a small show, and the table had applauded on cue. That was fine. I saw the choreography. The words, the nods, the rescue glances, none of it improvised. It didn't need my edits. When the plates were cleared and we stood to drift toward dessert, I slipped the feather into my pocket. It settled where it belonged for now. The rest of it could stay where they'd placed it. I understood the scene and the lines assigned. I kept mine simple and stayed in my chair until it was time to move. The dessert table breathed a steady cold. The cooler hummed under trays of tarts in neat rows, tiny lemons smiling at the room. Someone had overfilled the ice bucket. It cracked softly as it settled. I stepped to the end where the light was duller, and set down a plate I didn't want. Maya drifted up with a spoon held like a prop. I reached into my pocket, and put the feather on the tablecloth between us. Its edge made a clean line against the cheap linen, a small horizon in nickel gray. "You keep leaving this," I said. She looked at it, then at my face, smile intact for the people behind me. It was a good smile. Friendly. Portable. I watched it steady itself. "And Lena said I don't deserve you," I added. "Tell me the part I'm in." No heat in it. Just the room moving around us, the clink of tongs on steel, the hum, a laugh that didn't need us. Her smile held a beat too long, then trembled like a reflection when a bus passes outside. "You've been a lot," she whispered. The spoon touched her plate, a tap light as a metronome. Her eyes flicked toward the end of the table where Lena was aligning napkins no one needed, corners squared like she was measuring something. I let the pause settle. People nudged in, reached around. A hand brushed my shoulder, said sorry, kept going. Maya smoothed the tablecloth with the back of her fingers, as if the wrinkles were the problem. A lot how? I said. Not a challenge. A request for a noun. She watched my mouth, not my eyes. Checking in, she said. Asking what I'm up to. Timing things. It's been just a vibe. The last part was supposed to be light. It sank anyway. To you, I said. She waited for me to help her finish the sentence so she wouldn't have to. I didn't. Lena lifted a tray that didn't need lifting. She leaned without quite leaning in. Everything good here? The kind of question that announces itself to witnesses. I nodded once, kept my palms on either side of the feather. She took the nod like a receipt and moved 2 steps down to adjust a stack of plates that were already straight. You started new things, I said quietly, still looking at the feather. Early runs. The phone face down. The laugh for notifications that isn't for me. The story is that I reacted. I let it hang there. Maybe I did. Maybe you needed me to. Maya breathed, small and careful, like the dress demanded it. It's not a story, she said, too soft to carry. It's boundaries. She tilted the spoon, caught the light, set it down again. Okay, I said. Not agreement. Placement. She glanced at Lena again. I watched the glance and kept it to myself. Behind us, someone cursed softly at the cheesecake crumbling and then apologized to the room. The cooler kept humming. The napkins stayed aligned. You can take it, she murmured, nodding at the feather as if it were a favor. You keep track of things. I notice, I said. I slid it an inch closer to her. The metal left a faint drag line in the cloth. A reminder, or just physics. We stood like that. 2 plates cooling. A small object between versions of us. She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. I didn't rescue her with a joke or an explanation she could agree with in front of people. The table felt suddenly loud. I let it be. The feather stayed where I'd placed it, and I stayed where I was, long enough for her to decide if she would pick it up or let it lie. I didn't move first. I didn't need to. The week after moved like a whisper I could hear from 2 rooms away. Dotted messages arrived at odd hours, careful punctuation, offers to grab coffee. If you want to process. I hadn't asked for a counsel. Notes were being compared in rooms I didn't enter, drafts passed hand to hand until the margins looked like answers. Outside the market, Mason caught my eye over a stack of oranges. No cigarette this time, just his palms pressed together like he was trying not to drop anything invisible. You okay? He asked, voice lowered for the sidewalk. Then, before I could nod, it got messy. Too many versions. He didn't say which version, or who edited what. He glanced toward the intersection where the light had been red too long, and then turned green like it remembered. I tried to tell them to let it breathe. I stood there with a paper bag growing damp at the bottom. It will, I said. He waited for more and didn't get it. He nodded like someone closing a door without a click. The sympathy shifted. A couple of texts softened and leaned her way. She's been through a lot lately. One came in, like I'd been a weather report. We're here for her. I typed yes, thank you, and let the gray bubbles pass without offering a plot point. People like resolutions. They'll find one, with or without you. When I went by to grab a sweater, I let her know I'd be quick. The apartment had that mid-afternoon hush, the sun laying itself out across the floorboards. The air held a faint lemon, and the blue mug she liked sat upside down on a towel. The self-help paperback stood on the shelf at an angle that meant it had been moved for effect, not reading. I didn't go hunting for clues. I wasn't collecting evidence. She came out of the bedroom with her hair tied up, tied again. Do you have a minute? She asked, voice pitched for empathy. The way people on panels speak when the audience is a mirror. I set the bag on the table and took the sweater from the chair. The pewter feather was in my pocket, warm from the walk. It had kept that thin line along my palm all week, the way a coin does when you forget it's there until you don't. I've been thinking, she started. The first sentence sounded like a start to a speech she tried out on safer ears. Something about space, about kindness measured in exits. She searched my face for places to land it. I let the pause settle. I crossed to the window. The sill had a faint ring where a plant had overreached and then been moved. The glass held the street in a soft rectangle. Buses passing, a dog waiting for a signal, life doing what it does when no one narrates it. I set the feather there, edge catching in the paint, the metal taking on the light and dulling, brightening, dulling again as a cloud shifted. You keep leaving this where it can be found, I said, Not accusing, just naming. Her mouth opened, closed. Without a room nodding, the lines went loose. I didn't mean, she started, and the rest didn't come in a clean row. It didn't need to. Not every thought earns an audience. I picked up the sweater and folded it once. I won't be long, I said, which covered everything it needed to. She looked past me to the feather. It had always been a small thing, a marker to keep your place. It didn't belong in pockets. On my way out, the hallway felt the same as always. A neighbor's door propped open with a shoe, someone laughing at a screen 2 floors down. Regular noise. I took the stairs. On the street, the afternoon had moved 2 shades forward. Messages kept arriving on other people's phones and would keep arriving. They would decide what they believed. I didn't have to correct them. I didn't give a speech. I didn't ask for one. I left the feather where the light could judge it, and walked home lighter by exactly that small weight I'd been carrying. That was enough.